All right, let's be honest. Some days feel off before you even know why. You wake up, start moving, and something just feels slightly tilted, like the whole day is running on the wrong settings. Today we're breaking down exactly why that happens. Because most of the time it's not one big thing messing with your head. It's tiny things, and once you see them, you can stop them before they wreck your whole mood. Let's jump into the 7 hidden culprits that quietly throw your day off, using a little insight from Jung to make sense of why these small details hit so hard. The first culprit is simple, but it hits harder than you think. You start your day already in a rush. And I don't just mean you're moving fast. I mean you're out the door or opening your laptop before your brain has even checked in. It's like you're pushing play on your day while the system is still loading. That tiny mismatch creates this low-level tension that follows you everywhere. You're reacting instead of choosing. You're answering things instead of noticing things. You're basically playing catch-up before anything has even happened. And here's why it matters. That rushed start sets the tone without asking for your permission. You become shorter with people. You skip small steps that would have grounded you, and you don't even realize the shift because it feels normal. Jung pointed out that when something operates beneath your awareness, it still affects you. This is exactly that. It's invisible, but it's steering everything. The whole morning becomes this chain reaction triggered by the fact that you didn't give yourself even 30 quiet seconds to mentally arrive. Once you notice this culprit, though, the solution becomes obvious. The day doesn't need more time. It just needs a real starting point. The second culprit is unfinished tasks, and this one is way sneakier than it sounds. These aren't big dramatic projects you're consciously stressing about. These are the tiny half-done things you keep stepping over in your mind without actually dealing with them. The message you meant to answer, the tab you meant to close, the thing you told yourself you'd handle later, even though you kind of knew you wouldn't. They sit there like mental clutter you stopped seeing, but your brain absolutely hasn't forgotten about them. What makes these so disruptive is that they don't stay where you left them. Jung talked about how unresolved things don't just disappear. They drop below your awareness and keep influencing you from there. That's exactly what's happening. These unfinished tasks hover just under the surface, pulling at your attention in little micro-tugs you barely feel. You try to focus, but a part of your mind is always tracking the loose ends you didn't tie up. And here's the twist. It doesn't matter how small the task is. The size isn't the problem. It's the open loop. Your brain hates open loops. They drain your energy in slow, steady drips, and you only realize how much they've taken once you finally finish them and feel an unexpected sense of relief. It wasn't the task that was heavy. It was the invisible pressure of leaving it undone. This is why your day can feel off, for no obvious reason. You're not overwhelmed by what you're doing. You're overloaded by what you've been avoiding. Once you start closing those tiny loops, even just 1 or 2, the difference in mental clarity is immediate. Suddenly your brain stops whispering at you, and you get your focus and your day back. The third culprit is quick comments from other people, and this one hits you faster than you realize. Someone says something offhand, maybe without thinking, and you tell yourself it's no big deal. You shrug it off, move on, keep going with your day. But part of your mind doesn't move on. It hangs on to that tiny remark like a loose thread, and even though you're not actively thinking about it, it pulls at you in the background. And here's the thing. It's almost never the comment itself. It's the way your brain tries to figure out what it meant. Was it a joke? Was it criticism? Were you supposed to react differently? You replay it for half a second, and then you think you've dropped it. But it keeps echoing under the surface. Carl Jung talked about how small stimuli can stick to us when they hit something unspoken in our mind. And that's exactly what's happening here. It's not the comment. It's what it triggers. These tiny remarks can shift your whole mood without you being aware of it. Suddenly, you feel tense, or irritated, or weirdly insecure, and you can't explain why. It's subtle. You don't connect the feeling to the moment, so you just assume the day itself is off. But really, it's that one little line someone tossed out without thinking. The power of this culprit is that it sneaks in sideways. It doesn't announce itself. It just plants a question mark in your head and lets it grow. Once you learn to notice this, you start catching the moment it happens. You stop letting a 5-second remark take up a whole day of mental space. You get better at closing the door on comments that don't deserve your attention, and your day instantly feels lighter for it. The fourth culprit is clutter. Nothing dramatic, nothing chaotic, just the small buildup of stuff around you that you've stopped noticing. It could be the tabs you left open, the files on your desktop, the stack of things sitting on the corner of your table, or even the random notifications waiting for you. None of these feel big enough to matter on their own, so you brush past them. But your mind doesn't brush past them. It tracks every single piece, even when you think you're ignoring it. Clutter doesn't just take up space, it takes up mental bandwidth. Carl Jung pointed out that the things we don't consciously deal with still influence us beneath the surface, and clutter is a perfect example. Each unfinished pile, each open tab, each lingering notification is like a tiny open loop tugging at your attention. You try to focus on something important, but your mind keeps getting dragged sideways by the unresolved bits sitting in your environment. What makes clutter so sneaky is that it doesn't attack your day all at once. It slowly chips away at your clarity. You feel more distracted than usual. You lose track of what you were doing. You start tasks without finishing them. You feel mentally heavier without knowing why. None of these moments feel connected, but they all come from the same place. Your mind is trying to manage too many visual and digital signals at the same time. And the moment you clear even a small part of it, you feel the difference. It's like someone turned down the background noise in your brain. That sudden wave of relief proves how much weight those little pieces were putting on you. Clutter doesn't need to be dramatic to derail your day. It just needs to be present and ignored. Once you catch it, you can take back more mental space than you realized you were losing. The fifth culprit is comparison, and this one slips into your day so quietly that you barely notice it happening. You scroll for a minute, or glance at something online, or hear someone casually talk about their plans, and suddenly there's this tiny shift inside you. You don't call it jealousy, you don't call it pressure, you don't call it anything. But your mood changes, your energy dips, you feel behind without knowing what you're trying to catch up to. Comparison works fast because it doesn't need a big moment. It just needs a tiny window where your mind gets pulled into someone else's world. And once that happens, you stop paying attention to your own pace. Carl Jung talked about how outside influences can shape us when we're not fully aware of them. And this is exactly that. You're not comparing on purpose. You're reacting without realizing it. And here's the tricky part. Comparison rarely arrives as a clear thought. It shows up as a feeling. You suddenly feel less productive, less focused, or less satisfied with what you were doing 5 minutes ago. Nothing in your actual day changed. You just shifted into someone else's metric without noticing. That small emotional dip then leaks into everything else. Your tasks feel heavier. Your motivation feels weaker. Your whole day feels slightly off-kilter. And it all traces back to a 3-second moment you barely remember. The worst part is that comparison pretends to be harmless. It feels like nothing in the moment, so you don't see it as a threat. but it reshapes your mindset in a way that's subtle enough to go undetected and strong enough to distort the rest of your day. Once you learn to catch this culprit, you immediately feel the difference. You stop letting someone else's highlight reel set the tone for your mood, your goals, or your sense of momentum. And the moment you stay in your own lane again, your day starts to feel like yours. The sixth culprit is ignoring basic physical needs, and this one throws off your day in a way that almost never gets your attention. You're not dealing with anything major or dramatic. You're just skipping the tiny things your body quietly depends on. Maybe you haven't had water in hours. Maybe you've been sitting in the same position since the morning. Maybe you told yourself you'd take a quick break and then never actually took it. None of these feel like real problems, so you don't treat them like problems. But your body does. Here's the catch. Your mind and your body run the same day together, and if one of them gets neglected, the other one pays for it. Carl Jung talked about how tension builds beneath the surface when we don't pay attention to what's happening internally. When you ignore those simple physical signals, that hidden tension grows quietly until it starts leaking into your mood, your patience, and your clarity. Suddenly, everything feels slightly harder. You can't focus as long. You get irritated more quickly. Tasks that should be simple feel heavier for no reason. And you don't link any of it to the fact that your body has been waiting for something as basic as movement, rest, or a small reset. You assume it's the day itself that's off, not the unmet needs stacking up beneath you. The sneakiest part is that these dips in energy don't announce themselves. They just pull your performance and mood down a few notches at a time until the whole day feels fuzzy and slow. But the moment you give your body even one small thing it's been asking for, a stretch, a walk, water, a minute of stillness, you feel the shift almost instantly. It's proof that the day wasn't the problem. Your body was running on empty, and your brain was trying to power through it. Once you start noticing this culprit, your day gets lighter fast. You stop hitting that invisible wall in the middle of everything, and you finally feel like you're working with your body instead of against it. The seventh culprit is moving from one task to the next without giving your mind even a moment to reset. And this one is brutal because it hides inside what looks like productivity. You tell yourself you're being efficient, staying on top of everything, keeping the momentum going. But really, you're stacking mental load on top of mental load with zero breathing room in between. Your brain isn't a machine that instantly switches gears. It needs a beat, just a few seconds, to let go of one thing before grabbing the next. Carl Jung talked about how tension builds beneath awareness when we don't give ourselves space to process what's happening internally. That's exactly what's going on here. Every time you jump straight into the next thing, you're dragging a bit of leftover tension with you. One task leaves a trace. The next one piles on another, then another. You don't feel the weight right away, but by the afternoon, you suddenly realize you're overwhelmed, irritated, or mentally foggy, and you have no idea why. The sneaky part is that this feels normal. We're used to constant motion. We're used to filling every gap with something. But the cost is huge. When you never pause, your mind never closes the loops from the tasks you just finished. So instead of starting the next thing with clarity, you're starting it with leftover noise. That noise builds until your whole day feels cluttered, rushed, and tense, even if nothing complicated actually happened. The moment you give yourself tiny reset points, just a breath, a stretch, a pause, you feel the difference immediately. Your thoughts shift from scrambled to clear. Your mood steadies. The next task feels doable instead of draining. Your day doesn't pile up on you because you're actually resetting your mind instead of dragging everything forward. Once you spot this culprit, you stop confusing nonstop motion with real progress, and your whole day opens up in a way that finally feels manageable. Let's start by understanding why these tiny things matter more than you think. On the surface, a small comment, a half-finished task, or a messy desk doesn't seem like much. It's easy to shrug them off. But here's the thing. Your brain doesn't operate the way you think. Carl Jung pointed out that what's happening beneath the surface can have a huge influence on your thoughts, mood, and actions. Those little things you ignore, they're still registering. They're still tugging at your attention, even if you aren't consciously aware of it. And that's why your day feels off sometimes, for no obvious reason. It's not one big disaster. It's a series of small, almost invisible influences stacking up. Each tiny stressor is like a pebble in your shoe. By itself, it doesn't hurt much. But after a few hours of walking, it starts to hurt more than you'd expect. That's exactly what these mental pebbles do. They quietly drain your energy, mess with your focus, and make everything feel heavier, even when nothing major is happening. The crazy part is how fast it happens. You barely notice a small distraction or a little unfinished task, but your mind is keeping track. Over the course of the morning, by lunchtime, you're running on all these tiny, unnoticed tensions. Suddenly, your patience is gone, your motivation is low, and you feel like your day is just off. That's why spotting these little things matters so much. Awareness is the first step. Once you see them, you can start stopping them before they get the chance to pile up and take over your day. That's the hidden power of paying attention to the tiny stuff. Next, let's break down how your mind reacts before you even notice anything. This is the invisible part of your day that most people never see coming. Your brain is constantly scanning for tiny changes, small interruptions, even things you think you're ignoring. It picks up on unfinished tasks, background tension, or little comments from others long before your conscious mind realizes what's happening. Carl Jung explained that these hidden influences operate below awareness, and that's exactly what's going on here. Your mind is processing all of it without asking for permission. The tricky part is that you don't feel these reactions immediately. Instead, they slowly build in the background, nudging your mood, your focus, and your energy without leaving an obvious trace. You might start a task feeling off or notice irritation creeping in for no clear reason. That's your brain reacting to subtle pressures it picked up moments or even hours before. You're only aware of the result, not the cause. And because it all happens under the surface, it's easy to misread the signals. You think the problem is your day, your workload, or something external. But really, your mind has been quietly adjusting to tiny, almost invisible stressors this whole time. Once you understand how your brain reacts before you notice anything, you start seeing patterns. You realize that small interventions, pausing, clearing a tiny task, taking a breath, can stop a negative chain reaction before it even starts. That's the hidden power of awareness, and it's the foundation for taking back control of your day. Now let's talk about what happens when you catch these culprits early. The reset effect. And trust me, it's way more powerful than it sounds. The moment you start noticing these tiny things before they pile up, something shifts. You're no longer reacting to your day. You're guiding it. Every small mental tug you catch and handle becomes a little win that adds up. You start your tasks with clarity instead of leftover tension. You interact with people without carrying unnoticed irritations. Your energy doesn't get siphoned off by unfinished loops or mental clutter because you've cleared it before it snowballs. Here's the cool part. You feel it almost immediately. That foggy, sluggish feeling that used to sneak in, gone. That invisible pressure that made your day feel heavier, lifted. Your brain feels like it's running on a lighter, smoother path. And suddenly, even mundane tasks feel easier. Carl Jung's insight fits perfectly here. Once you bring these underlying influences into awareness, they lose their power over you. Your mind stops letting small, unnoticed things dictate your mood, focus, or energy. And the reset effect doesn't just stop at one moment. Once you make a habit of catching these little culprits early, it compounds. Days stop slipping through your fingers. You start noticing patterns, anticipating distractions, and gently steering your day instead of being carried along. Your mind feels more organized, your energy feels steadier, and even stressful moments become easier to handle because the background noise isn't dragging you down. That's the real power of catching these tiny things before they take over. You don't just survive the day, you actually own it. Finally, let's talk about what you can start noticing today. The goal isn't to overhaul your entire life in one morning. It's about spotting the small things that quietly hijack your day. Start with awareness. Notice the tiny moments that pull at your attention. An unfinished email lingering in the corner of your mind, a quick comment that left a weird feeling, or the stack of tabs and files you've ignored for hours. Just noticing them is the first step. Next, tune in to how your body feels. Are you tense, restless, or sluggish without a clear reason? That's usually a signal your brain is reacting to something small that you've ignored. Even tiny habits, like skipping a sip of water, missing a short stretch, or jumping from one task to the next without pause, can quietly pile up. Just paying attention to these things lets you catch them before they snowball. Also, start observing patterns in your mood. When do you feel distracted, drained, or slightly off? What triggered it, even subtly? These little mental and emotional clues are your mind's way of signaling that a hidden culprit is at work. The more you notice these signs, the better you get at spotting them in real time, and the faster you can hit the reset button. Here's the key. You don't need to fix everything at once. Awareness alone gives you an edge. Once you start catching these tiny influences before they take over, you'll feel lighter, sharper, and more in control of your day. And once you get good at it, it becomes automatic. You'll start noticing these patterns before they even have a chance to affect you. That's where real change begins.